So I have 6:30, so I will call the meeting to order. And tonight we are doing something a little different. And they need to have an executive session. We're going to do it first thing. So I'd ask for the motions to be made to put us into executive session.
I'll move to find the premature public knowledge regarding a contractual agreement and attorney-client communications would clearly place the town at substantial disadvantage. I'd also move that we enter into executive session to discuss a contractual agreement and attorney-client communication under provisions of Title I, Sections 313A, 1A, and F of the Vermont statutes, and invite Town Manager Eric Wells, Public Works Director Bruce Orr, Town Attorney David Ruff, and representative from the Oak Hill Estates Homeowners Association to join.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we are in executive session and we expect to return about 7:50. So, I did call the meeting to order, but call it to order again. We've just exited executive session. We're now on to the regular schedule, not too bad, only about 5 or 6 minutes later than we expected. So, the next item on the agenda are the 3 sets of minutes. So, we'll be looking at the minutes for June 15th, 2021 first. So, I need a motion.
Move we adopt subject to modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
Looking at page 1. And page 2.
Is this June 15th? June
Pardon me?
June 15th?
June 15th. And page 3. Hearing no corrections then, all those in favor of approving the minutes of June 15th, 2021, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We have done it unanimously. And moving on then to June 22nd, 2021. Is there a motion?
I was not present.
Still make a motion.
No,
I can't
okay.
vote.
Move we adopt subject to modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's only one page, page 1. Hearing no corrections, all those in favor of approving the minutes of June 22nd, 2021, say aye. Aye.
Aye. Oh, no,
Any opposed?
abstain. Sorry, I abstain.
Any opposed? One abstention, 10. And then the minutes of June 29th, 2021. Is there a motion?
Move we adopt subject to modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
We're on page 1. And page 2. And hearing no corrections on that, all those in favor of approving the minutes of June 29th, 2021, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed and one abstention, Ted?
I abstain.
And that takes care of the minutes. And we're moving on then to public comment. Is there any, Eric, anyone on the outside of the building that wishes to make any public comments?
Terry, I put a note in the chat, and I don't see anyone who'd like to speak remotely on Zoom at this time.
Okay, anyone in the audience who wishes to make any public comment tonight? And nothing in the chat room?
Nope.
Okay, then we'll move on then to the resolution for service to Williston. Eric and Bruce, I think you have something to comment on these.
Sure. Well, I can kick this off. Paul's joining us this evening. Paul Luttrell. He's retired earlier this month after 17 years of service in the Williston Highway Department. And if the chair would like, I can read the resolution for the record. Resolution of the Williston Selectboard, whereas Paul Luttrell retired on July 1st, 2021, after serving the Williston community for over 17 years in the Highway Department. And whereas Mr. Luttrell served as Assistant Highway Foreman, acting to oversee operations of the department in all seasons and conditions. And whereas his steadfast work ethic and dedication to the Williston community epitomized public service. And whereas over the years, he served as a mentor to numerous members of the Highway Department to provide training and assistance on the job. Now therefore be it resolved, the Williston Select Board hereby recognizes and thanks Paul Luttrell for his many years of service to the Williston community. Wishes him the very best in his retirement. Adopted this 13th day of July, 2021.
Bruce, anything to add?
I don't know who allowed you to retire. Oh, it's on. Paul, just outstanding. It was a real pleasure for me to work with Paul. I'm the director, but it's people like Paul. And, I told you guys, a little luncheon for Paul. I told you guys, don't forget. I was the first one I see in the morning on the way into town. I said, Paul, I did it. So we got big shoes to fill. And Paul's always been ready to sit up and play, never complain. Usually a smile on his face. Just been a real pleasure. Well deserved that you guys are recognized. It's really great.
On behalf of the board, we certainly appreciate your years of service, and we had the opportunity to sign the resolution just now, and Eric will present it to you.
Did you want to do a photo or anything, Terry?
Oh,
or
sure.
just- okay.
Congratulations, Paul. I think we actually we need to make a motion to adopt the resolution, I believe.
I'll move to adopt the resolution recognizing the service of Paul Luttrell to Williston as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. And we have done it. Thank you very much, Paul.
Paul.
Thank you.
Moving on then to interviews and appointments. Tonight we have a candidate for the Cemetery Commission. And Drew Nelson is here. And if you'd come up to the table, please, that would be helpful to us. And we do have your application in front of us. And if you'd like to give us a very brief description of your background and why you wish to be a member of the Cemetery Commission.
Well, background is from the Army to business, and then my wife and I have owned a couple of our own businesses. But in each community where we've lived or worked, I've always tried to make a commitment to that community. And for the last 4 years, we've been here in Williston. We're retired, so I have the time and would like to serve on the commission. And why the Cemetery Commission? I really actually grew up in cemeteries. My father was a retail monument dealer. So from some of my earliest years, I remember going through cemeteries, looking for monuments, cleaning them, studying them in some cases, and then one summer actually doing some restoration work and repairing them. So I have a great interest in them.
Yes, thank you very much. There is a organization in the state called the Vermont Old Cemetery Association. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I'm aware of it. I do not belong. I've been a member of the 251 Club of Vermont for probably 30 plus years, and last year gave up my board seat there, which I had had since '02. So in those travels, we've gone through several cemeteries in Vermont as well.
I bet you have.
There are some interesting people buried,
Yes.
some famous ones.
Any questions for the board for Drew?
Just idle curiosity, what's the Stanford Executive Program?
It's a 2-month program at the Stanford Business School. I did it in the summer of '88. There were 180 of us from really all over the world. It was a terrific experience, and I'm still in touch with some of the people that were in the group with me.
Well, I'm sure that trained you well for the Cemetery Commission in Williston, Vermont. And actually, just a super quick anecdote. My brother Tim, a year older than me, and I mowed two of the Catholic cemetery lawns in Richmond, Vermont, growing up, and the church lawn. And the cemetery on Cochrane Road has a whole bunch of Civil War dead in it. And we were using push mowers at the time. We were in middle school, and that was our job. And my brother interrupted me to tell me that he had just stepped into a grave, that the crypt must have fallen, and his foot went straight down to his knee with the lawnmower. He let go of the lawnmower. But the funny thing about that is that the movie Carrie had just come out, where at the end the ghost comes through the grave and grabs somebody. But that didn't scare us at all, because we were so used to being in cemeteries by that time that we were like, yeah. But anyway, so let's hope your service here makes it so that nobody falls into a grave who's not supposed to.
Your cemeteries are very nice. You really have a jewel here. I brought copies of the fall 2020 Barry Life magazine. Eric has one, Sarah Mason has one too. And I brought enough copies for the board members. But the front picture is the Chittenden Monument.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's a nice 2-page article inside it. So I thought you might have that.
Thank you.
Like,
Thank you.
That's a real jewel in the
Yeah.
cemeteries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Any other questions for Drew?
No.
Then a motion would be in order.
I'll move to appoint Drew Nelson to the Cemetery Commission for an unexpired term through June 30th, 2025.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
There are no negative votes, so congratulations. Thank you, Brent, for
Thank
your
you.
willingness to do this.
Should I just pass these
Yeah,
around?
that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much.
I volunteered one day a week down at the Rock Granite Museum.
Oh, wow.
Barry Granite Association's office is in the same
Thank you.
building.
Thank you.
I was able to-
Yeah.
Nice.
I'll leave one for Jeff. And you know about the meeting tomorrow? Cemetery. Okay. Yep. In the gazebo. They might be in the church if it's raining. Yeah. Thanks. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on to the noise ordinance variance request, and we will have Jake Borgeson from the USDA with us remotely, I believe. Tonight we have a member of the Conservation Commission, Laura Meyer, who is here. And if we need to have questions regarding the fire chief, we can have him on remotely as well. So Eric, if you want to lead off with a little bit of history of where we're at and what we're doing tonight.
Sure, Terry. And I'm just getting Jake connected here over Zoom. But so the board took up this request originally at the May 4th meeting a few months ago. It's from United States Department of Agriculture to use pyrotechnic noise-making devices as a matter to deter birds from the Casella facility on Avenue B in town to prevent conflicts with the flight path for the nearby airport runway. The noise emitted by these devices exceeds the limit in that zoning district of 90 decibels through the town's noise ordinance, and thus would require a variance granted by the select board. After the May 4th meeting of the select board, additional information has been gathered and shared with your materials this evening. In addition, the Conservation Commission discussed this at their meeting in May and provided a memo, which Laura can speak to this evening. We also have comments from the airport. Chief Collette has provided a memo, and I've also provided a memo that looks at how sound level could travel over distance. The select board also held a special meeting to witness a demonstration of these devices from many different distances in June. And as we mentioned, we have Jacob Borgeson from USDA with us this evening, and Laura. And I think at that point, Terry, we can turn it over to our presenters.
But thank you. So if we can get Jake on the line and have him do whatever presentation he has, and I think we'll have questions for him as well.
Yep, Jake, I see you. I've got you as a panelist. You'll just need to unmute, and we'll get you on the TV here.
Can you hear me okay here, Eric?
We can.
Yep, there we go.
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
excellent.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you guys just fine. I'm at my house here remote, so I just want to make sure you can all hear me. That's
Okay,
all.
good.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, Jake. And so you would refresh our memories about what the request is from USDA and go into specifics, hopefully if you can, about the frequency that this will occur, the days, the time of the days that it would happen, the number of days per week, and the length of time you might expect this to go on.
Sure. Eric gave a pretty nice brief description on what the original request was and why we're attempting to expand our efforts at the Casella facility off Avenue B, primarily for bird abatement measures for the flight path of major aviation traffic at Burlington International and the Vermont Air National Guard, as well as to assist Casella with their ongoing increased bird hazards and bird nuisance that they've had at the facility, ongoing now for several years, most notably in 2021, especially in the spring of 2021, we saw a notable increase in gull activity at the facility, primarily believed to be from the additional handling of increased food waste at the facility for the guidance and regulations under Vermont composting laws. And invariably, they've been dealing with more direct food waste management in a direct hands-on type fashion. And I think as a result, we have seen the gull numbers kind of steadily increasing with that adoption of these new techniques. Now, as far as frequency and timing of events that we would predict for pyrotechnic use, I've explained before, it varies so much throughout the year, and gulls tend to have a somewhat predictable time frame as far as increased activity, especially on the airfield and in the vicinity of the airfield, namely Casella and other areas within the Champlain Valley that we know of. And that the most prevalent or the most increased hazard that we see for gulls tends to be in the spring months, right in the heart of spring. Typically, once migration has begun with all our neighboring Champlain Valley birds, and it carries right through till most of those birds are actually sitting on nests on Champlain. With gull chick rearing, there's a variety of food sources available at that time. So it seems like the gull activity and the numbers tend to decrease. Now, not to say that gulls won't increase there in numbers for other reasons periodically throughout the year. I mean, there's so many other factors that can come into play for that. But I would say the primary use of these pyros would be more geared towards the spring months. And that's kind of where this initial call for the variants occurred in April and into May of this year. Now, as far as pyrotechnic use at the facility, it would be rather sparse, to be honest. It's hard to say how rapidly those gulls will respond to pyrotechnic use. I mean, and as far as history goes with us at other facilities and other projects, gulls harass rather well with pyrotechnic devices. We've been using these devices for a large number of years in Vermont as well as nationally, as far as USDA goes. So the exact number of pyrotechnics in a day, it would probably be somewhat limited. At any given event, there could be as many as 2 to 3 pyrotechnics discharged to get those birds to rapidly disperse effectively in the allotted time that we would have between air traffic. And any bird dispersal there is going to be performed in direct contact with air traffic control tower, which under our ongoing project at the Burlington International Airport and Vermont Air National Guard, we directly communicate with air traffic control tower under live ATC frequencies daily throughout every initiation that we do there. So like I said, just to kind of briefly wrap that up, I would say most of the activity would be springtime into early summer And our efforts are Monday through Friday. Typically, we're not weekend warriors, and the Casella facility is not having normal operation hours on Sundays. However, anyway, so it would be Monday through Friday, typically during the day. We may be there early in the mornings if the birds are prevalent and we know the hazard is relevant and bird increase numbers are there. And that would kind of run throughout the course of the day. And like I said, to shed light on how effective the pyrotechnics will be, I have good promise that they'll work well in conjunction with other methods of, non-lethal methods at the facility that are being used already. This would be a definite added tool for the box to move these birds on. And as far as where we stand right now with gulls at the facility, there's sporadic gull activity there. However, the numbers now are drastically lower than what they would have been in the spring. And that is to no cause of pyrotechnic use at all. Simply these would be, used sparingly as we feel necessary throughout the year to disperse those larger numbers of birds.
Thank you, Jake. Questions from the board members?
Jake, how would you all measure the efficacy of the noisemakers on the gull population? What would be the plan to measure that and to determine that this was an effective strategy?
Yeah, I mean, we would probably just perform ongoing continued point count surveys numbers there with gull numbers to try to match that up with some of the historical numbers that we have seen. We've been, doing ongoing observations at the Casella facility now for quite a few years. To measure the true effectiveness of the pyrotechnics, I think it would be best to, delineate Casella as an off-point hazard survey. We do ongoing bird surveys at the airport, and I think this would just be a good spot to add on to that list as an additional point count to essentially observe, how those gull numbers are responding to these devices, as well as, other techniques that are being utilized at that facility.
Can you review briefly just what the other techniques that are being utilized right now there?
Sure. Yeah. Historically, Casella keeps a pretty clean facility as it is. And with bird issues in general, the first and foremost method is to keep those birds to the best extent possible from accessing the food resource. Now, with birds like gulls and other birds like blackbirds and crows, it doesn't take a lot to get large numbers of birds to congregate there. So that's the first step, is to keep a clean, tidy facility, which they do. They're noted for that. They're professionals and they do a good job at that. Secondary is, some other methods that are being used there are audible distressed vocalizations that they have recorded. If any of you have been to the Casella transfer at any given time, you've probably heard the audible device that's playing in the background. They will use that as bird numbers increase. We have been flying kites there to simulate both eagle and peregrine falcon effigies. Natural predators of ring-billed gulls, primarily on Lake Champlain, peregrine falcons being probably one of the most prominent predators, as well as they've begun to grid some of their rooftops. They've installed some wires, some anti-perching devices, as well as a device called daddy long legs, which are stainless steel wires that basically have a center attachment point and extend 8 feet in all directions, which in turn keeps the gulls from being able to actively roost or perch on the edges of the buildings, most nearest to the actual transfer station floor where the active material is dealt with. And when gulls typically can't perch like that, it puts them away from the food resource a little bit further. And that starts to dissuade them a little as well. Casella has also been very receptive to these techniques. There has been conversation with Joe Gay there, as well as Mike Casella, to possibly install a grid system above the facility to discourage birds from coming down, similarly to the Green Mountain compost facility off of Redmond Road. So all of these in conjunction I think with the limited use of pyrotechnics should have a relatively strong effect on dispersing some of these birds from becoming, overly habituated to the facility, which they already are.
Other questions from the board?
Jake, I heard the alternatives and the different things that are used. Are there any circumstances that are similar to this where pyrotechnic noisemakers are not used at all, but there is another effective solution?
Typically with us, of all the work that we've done statewide and on a national level, pyrotechnics are one of the number one tools that we use. We use them right at the neighboring airport daily, as a matter of fact, for all birds, dispersing birds from the flight path. So, I think, like I said, that one of the best methods we've ever found as an agency to disperse large numbers of birds like this, gulls being one of the, more commonly species that we deal with on a regular basis is pyrotechnics. As far as, being one of the most effective non-lethal techniques known in the book, pyrotechnics have been around for a long time now.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? So Jake, if you can stay with us during the course when we hear from the Conservation Commission, and also we may have some people in the audience remotely that may have some questions or comments that you could respond to.
Absolutely.
Good, thank you. So Conservation Commission Representative Laura Meyer. Hi.
Thank you. Laura Meyer, I know I haven't met Greta yet. Hi.
Nice to meet you.
On the Conservation Commission, I am now acting as chair of the Conservation Commission. And as Eric mentioned, you have a memo from Melinda. And we, on May 19th, met with Jake and also Joe Gay from Casella. The members of the Conservation Commission expressed concern about the location of Casella's food scrap facility, just being near the airport. But barring moving, the Conservation Commission does recommend that the Select Board grant a noise ordinance waiver for a trial period. And Melinda has stated in her memo what the Conservation Commission was concerned about. As Joe mentioned, he's doing point counts, so they'd like to understand and document the effectiveness as well as the effects of the devices. He also talked about the different techniques, and we wanted to see that documented, what the long-term mix of techniques to be used are, and documentation of monitoring of target as well as non-target species. The commission was worried that there might be other songbirds. One commission member was worried about a bat colony that's near the airport. To this date, the data on how noise affects bat behavior is kind of scarce, especially loud behaviors that are just, once in a while, and not just background noise. So I think Melinda also put that at the bottom of the memo. The commission also recommends further investigation into mitigating the source of the problem, which I already mentioned. It sounds like Casella does keep their food scrap facility very neat. I think the main concern was the location of the facility. And I think that was really it, if there are any questions for the Conservation Commission.
Thank you, Laura. Questions for Laura from the board before we ask Jake to respond?
How long a test period were people thinking? Was that discussed?
No, that was not discussed. Trial period, just
Yeah, I don't know either.
seeing how it worked for you, maybe, I don't know.
So if we were to, either tonight or some other time soon, agree to a waiver, would it be reasonable well, they'll be looking to work from now into, well, into the summer, which summer is here. A few months.
Well, it sounds like spring is when the pyrotechnics are most needed. So Jake could probably answer that question about how long of a trial period would make sense.
Other questions from the board before I ask Jake to respond? Jake, you heard the request from the Conservation Commission and your response to it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We'll take any time frame that we can get as far as a trial period. I'm totally wide open as an agency for doing that. And not sure how much we're going to be using them right now, but honestly, with even moderate gull activity there, I would still like to even just utilize them periodically to see the initial effect these gulls may have on pyros at that facility. So in response to time frame, yes, I think, like I said, spring is by far the most needed time. However, at this point, I think we would be definitely willing to entertain any granted time frame here. And to jump on the bat colony nearby as well. I have reached out to our small mammal biologist with Vermont Fish and Wildlife and chatted with her about this as well. And just to concur that her feelings on it are the same. There's not a lot of studies and there's not a lot of information there pertaining to the primary disturbance of bats via loud noise. Her agreement is just as ours with other projects that we perform in the area is tree disturbance and building demolitions tend to be the point causes of the detriment to bats on a local level. So the other thought process is with spring, summer, and even early fall months, primarily, as we know, bats are active mostly in the summertime, and bats can easily move and respond to disturbance levels at that time, to readily move themselves. It's more the bat hibernaculums that they're primarily concerned about. So she agreed. I mean, there's not a lot of information there pertaining to it. We obviously know these bats reside within close proximity to an active airport where there's a lot of noise already. So I find it unlikely that pyrotechnics would really have any effect on a limited basis of the bats down below.
Good, thank you. Looking at Melinda's memo, there was some concern that they're not sure that the bats even exist there at this point. And would there be any way to, for you or for the Vermont Fish and Wildlife organization to make a determination as to whether they even exist there?
I mean, that's something certainly to bring up with Alyssa Bennett and the rest of the Vermont Fish and Wildlife team. We work with them collaboratively on most all our projects anyway, as one agency to the next. But historically, they have done acoustic monitoring as well as mist netting down in the neighboring property to the north and west of the Casella property. And I believe they did a study within the last handful of years down there, which still documented some sort of bat presence in that area. I know some of that work has been performed by Vermont Fish and Wildlife, as well as some private consultation in the actual Vermont Air National Guard, part of their ongoing natural resource management plan there on the facility. And we've been involved with that just to some extent over time as far as our partnership with the Vermont Air National Guard.
Good, thank you. Any other questions for Laura? Anyone on the chat line that wishes to ask questions or speak?
Yeah, Terry, I have Courtney Howard had a question or comment. So Courtney, I think you can hear me from home. What I'm going to do is allow you to talk here. You'll be unmuted and you can speak with the select board or ask a question of any of our guests here. So just a moment, Courtney.
Excellent. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Hi, my name is Courtney Howard, and I I'm the mother of a child who attends EJ's Kids Club, and that is a daycare center which is really tight to the radius of where these pyros would be dispersed. And actually just wanted to bring to your attention, if you weren't already aware, that there are 2 daycare centers within quite a close range. And what I mean by close range is 1,800 feet and 2,200 feet. So that would be the Williston Enrichment Center and also EJ's Kids Club. And so I believe from what I heard from the last meeting is that the pyros might be discharged upwards of 20 or 30 times a day. And so my obvious concern is how does that impact learning and the sleeping and napping of the infants and the young toddlers at these daycare centers? And then my second concern would be how do you ensure or test the noise levels, the decibel level of what would occur at the daycare centers, just to ensure that they're within safe, safe for the children's hearing and so forth.
Thank you, Courtney. And Eric has sent a memo regarding noise and how far noise travels. We also did an on-site meeting with the select board to see how sound goes from the current location on Redmond Road out as far as a mile. So Eric, would you want to talk about your memo?
Sure, Terry. So what I tried to do was learn more about the science of how sound travels. And what I put in the memo is this idea. It's called the inverse square law. Basically, when sound's emitted from a fixed distance, when that distance is doubled, it decreases by 6 decibels. Was the piece that I found. Now, granted, this is not real world tested in every situation, but just a principle
Right.
of the science here. So what I did was try to map out the approximate location where these would be. And then I took a high level of 120 decibels, approximated, say that was 3 feet away, and then carried on from there in the chart I put together. So really from that approximation, just based on this formula, when you got to be about 96 feet away or so from these, the decibel level would reach the ceiling of what's allowed in the zoning district based on this formula. Granted, this is done from a formula in a book and not a real world test, but from analyzing it with this perspective, as you start getting to those distances of 1,400 feet away, 2,900 feet away, quarter mile, half mile, your decibel levels are likely going into the 60s just based on this model. But I'll preface that it is a model.
Okay, yeah, I'm actually a scientist and I drew
Okay.
out a radius too. So it does look like it's going to be 66 decibels, but I would like to see some real world testing and see if that's accurate. And then also, I'm not as familiar with zoning and what the noise regulations would be, but what I'm curious, what is the noise zoning for areas in which there are other schools in Williston, and is 66 decibels an appropriate noise level that would be considered okay? Some of your other schools like Williston Central.
I can consult the ordinance. I do know in the ordinance in this district and town, the maximum is 90, which is the board's
Okay.
considering tonight. But I can certainly follow
Yeah.
up Courtney on the question for the other schools.
Yeah, it would be great to just hear, especially if there is a test period, how that is going for the learning and the well-being of the children, because there are 2 daycare centers, quite large ones, within the vicinity, or if there's any creative thinking that could be done in dispelling them, at off times or around nap times. I don't know. That could be a logistical nightmare, but just voicing a concern from a parent.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you for hearing me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else on the line?
I don't see anyone in the chat right now. Oh, here we go. Hold on 1 second, just catch up here with the. Okay, there we go. Hi, Christina. I see you in the chat here. I'll get you connected here in just a moment.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. I'm another parent at EJ's Kids Club, and I just had a follow-up question to the couple questions that Courtney just asked. I also had listened to the previous recording, and I thought it was mentioned that the similar noise ordinance was granted in South Burlington and maybe some other towns. So I was curious, I know you did the projection based on the sound traveling, but from some of the other towns where the ordinance was granted and the pyrotechnics are being used, is there no real world testing or the sound monitoring that has been done that could validate those ranges?
Thanks, Christina. I did reach out to our colleagues in South Burlington regarding this subject matter, and I didn't hear anything back from them regarding any concerns. The deputy manager at the time reached out to their department heads on this, so I wasn't able to obtain that level of information. Certainly, we have opportunity with the from Green Mountain Compost where I could go back out and take a decibel reader this time and see what the reading is. Where those are let off, or work with the USDA to take a reading as well if the board grants a variance here. But those are just some possible suggestions to look at noise levels.
Okay, yeah, and just if the board is to grant the waiver on a temporary basis, then I would just hope that as part of the follow-up, that you may check in with especially these daycare centers that are located so closely by. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, in the spring, when everyone is first getting outside and the kids can, really be spending a lot of time outdoors. And then, if these things were going off up to 20 times a day, I also have similar concerns just on the safety for the kids and, hearing concerns, and just making sure that we're doing everything that's a potential option without impact first to, manage the birds before resorting to this current approach.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else on the chat line?
Yep, I see Terry Marin. Terry, I'll get you connected right now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi,
Yep.
Terry. Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, my name is Terry Merritt, resident of Williston. And I spoke last time at the last meeting. And I just wanted to relay my, thoughts about the situation there. And I would just like to see the board maybe asks Casella to try alternative methods to using the pyrotechnics or in a combination. And I just think that the filament netting down on the CUD down on Redmond Road works great. I go by there once a month at least and do not see a lot of gull activity. And they use large equipment. So I think that the height of the filament is high enough to where it actually works. Also, there's a significant amount of noise over there in that area, the airport and the F-35s, and just adding more noise, especially at random times, is pretty disruptive to people's lives and businesses. And the folks that spoke about the daycare facility, and also there's a dog care facility close by. And I think that maybe this is just maybe the wrong spot for this type of facility. I don't know why a site wasn't done before it was set up, and that it didn't realize that having food scraps right next to a airport wasn't going to create a hazard for air traffic, and that should have been, realized and maybe put in a different place. And also the other thing is that CSWD apparently has plenty of capacity for more food scraps. I don't know why that wasn't entertained, that Casella bringing the food scraps to the CSWD facility on Redmond Road that makes it into compost. So they're already there. And I just don't think that this will be a short-term solution at all. As long as that food is at that facility, those birds are going to keep coming back. So this is going to be term solution, which is just going to be constant. Every spring they will come back, they'll remember, and they'll try again. And the bat population was spoken about, and the biggest part of that would be winter hibernation, where the bird bangers and extra noise would bring those bats out of hibernation, and that would be great to see if the bat population is still there. So I hope Fish and Wildlife follows up with that. And then lastly, I think that I read the memos about the fire department, and the fire chief there had some really good points, and maybe a site visit with the Williston Fire Department should be set up so they can look and see if there's hazards and dangers, and maybe some education for the people, folks going to be setting those off. So I just want to urge maybe the select board to definitely, do this on a trial basis, but also request that they try the filament technique, because I just think it really works well on Redmond Road, and I do not see a lot of gulls hanging around that compost pile. So thank you for hearing me out.
No, thank you. Anyone else on the chat room?
I don't see anyone else who'd like to speak, Terry, at this time.
So the question is, tonight, do we have enough information to make a decision, or do we need more information? There's been a couple of requests for more information from residents.
So my question for Jake would be, if Casella is planning, as a couple of people have mentioned, and I think he mentioned that maybe they were planning or thinking about putting a grid, or I assume that is the filament that he was speaking of, if that is in place, or if plans to do that would be stopped if this noise ordinance variance was granted.
I can certainly follow up with Joe at Casella on what their long-term plans are. Like I said before, I know Casella is very receptive on all of these techniques, and the initial conversation with Joe, I believe at our Conservation Commission meeting, was to sincerely, give the monofilament gridding system an honest look at. So I will follow up with Joe this week and make sure that that's something that they're still wanting to entertain in the process of doing this here. Excuse my dog, she is barking at me here in the background. But no, I will follow up with Joe this week and see see if they have already initiated plans to do that. I know we've chatted about it offline a couple of times already, and as I said, they're very receptive to want to do the right thing there. I know to mimic the system at Green Mountain Compost, I think is a good idea. That has shown some effectiveness there, and just to kind of to piggyback on Terry's comment earlier too, they keep in mind that they do use limited pyrotechnics at the Green Mountain Compost Center as well. I just want to stress that a little bit, because they're able to utilize that technique in their toolbox to assist with keeping those gulls at bay. So as I said before, it's a bunch of techniques to create a rather dynamic environment there to dissuade or reduce the bird numbers as best as possible. And it's definitely going to be a concerted effort of a lot of different techniques.
Good, thank you, Jake. Any other questions for Jake? If not, it sounds to me like if we get more information that was requested tonight, both from Jake and Eric, will get some more that we can pick this up and hopefully have a resolution next meeting.
Terry, if I, just to be clear, it looked for me to gather some real world decibel data with using these devices. Is that what the board would like, just so I have my?
I'm sorry, didn't hear what you said.
Should I be, just to recap, to collect some data using these with a decibel meter to understand what the reading is for a real world trial here?
I think that's right.
Okay, I'll work on that.
And maybe to follow up with South Burlington and see if they have
Yeah.
collected any of that data.
Okay,
And I'm sorry, could we add something to that?
sure. I'll make sure I have my list here.
Well, it's the monofilament technique that's used in other facilities. I'm wondering if we could have contact with those other facilities to see the extent of the problem they were confronting and the extent to which that problem was addressed by the monofilament.
I'll follow up and inform the board.
Great.
Any other requests? If not, thank you, Laura, for coming
Thank you.
tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
So I know there's a bunch of people waiting out in the ante room. If we can get our police department folks to come in. So good evening. Tonight we have a report on the police data that's been collected. We have Chief Foley, Lieutenant Moore, and Sergeant Shepard with us tonight to present a report to us. So if you could pull up another chair to the table, that would be good.
We'll get the technology here set up in just a moment.
Yeah.
We're gonna get that laptop connected via Zoom here, so just be a moment.
So welcome.
Evening.
Good evening, thank you.
And you should have a link just a moment, Sergeant Shepard. And what I'll do is if you can join the meeting, make you a panelist, then you can share your screen and it will come up on that screen. Just need to make sure you mute your mic. Yep, and if you share screen at the bottom, hopefully it will work. Look at that there. So I can I can give a brief introduction when it's here. So we've got our police leadership here with us this evening, Chief Foley, Lieutenant Moore, and Sergeant Shepard. And they're going to be giving a police data report this evening. This is the second year we've done this. And what we do is a way to share what the activity has been in the department for the past year and share some things to think about moving forward. But I've shared this with the board ahead of time in your packet for possible initial review, and Sergeant Shepherd will go through the presentation this evening, and everyone's here to answer any questions the board may have. So I'll turn over to Sergeant Shepherd.
Good evening, everyone. I know a few of you have seen the presentation from last year. It's going to be very similar, but there's a lot of updates, obviously, with COVID. Things have wrenched in the works on a lot of them. So we'll go through it real quick, and if you have any questions, by all means, stop me and I'll answer whatever I can. Like I just said, as a disclaimer, everyone knows 2020 is not a typical year. There are a lot of things that happen, so I did a lot of percent analysis because the numbers are so far off. A lot of stuff we couldn't do because of COVID. Who are we? For those of you who don't know, we're authorized 17 sworn full-time police officers. We've got 17. We're currently full. We have the chief, the lieutenant, who are to my left. There's 4 patrol sergeants, 10 officers, and a comfort dog officer. We've got 2 full-time dispatchers right now for 7-day-a-week coverage, and we have a third one that's coming on board that's going to give us our overnight coverage on the busier nights, which is going to be awesome. That's my shift, and that's going to be a huge change for us, a positive change. It's supplemented by 3 part-time dispatchers and an administrative assistant. On the sworn side, we have quite a variety. We've got 2 female officers, 15 male officers. We've got a wide range of backgrounds. We've got 3 who are EMTs. We've got 2 with Coast Guard experience, a couple with degrees in criminal justice. I have a degree in computer science. We've got 1 person who volunteers as a firefighter who's actually a captain with a firefighting agency. We've got a wide range of law enforcement experience. Everyone from, we've got brand new people to the chief's got, what, 45 years, chief? 45 years, so that's a long time. One thing that we're sort of looking towards right now, this is not necessarily affecting us now, but it will. There's some danger on the horizon. We've got fewer people graduating from the full-time police academy, and there are a larger number of officers leaving the full-time service. So this year, there's only going to be 23 graduates, and that's fixed right now, where once this class graduates, that's it. And there's projected to be 144 people leaving. And it's going to exacerbate the number of positions versus how many are filled, which is the next slide, showing that we have right now, there are 875 authorized full-time officers in the state of Vermont, and only 745 of those positions are filled. And I suspect that gap is going to increase quite a bit. So this is just a food for thought as we move forward into the next several years, because it takes quite a while to train an officer, hire an officer, the whole 9. One of the driving factors in our police resource usage is the amount of businesses and just sheer call volume, the people that come to Williston to work, shop, and dine. Businesses generate calls for service. We've got retail theft, fraud, vandalism, crashes. Unlike smaller towns such as Jericho, Richmond, that may not have the business population, we have it, and that generates a huge amount of calls for service. Crashes, everything, you name it, that's what we get it from, is a lot of that. Because of that, we've got a unique need. You see 10,000 and you may say you don't really need that much, and then turns around, you look at all the businesses that are here and you really do need that much. We've got some of the busiest retail stores in the state, and also several of the busiest state-controlled intersections belong to the town of Williston. That includes a lot of the 2A and 2 corridor. Everyone will know that. And everyone hates the amount of traffic. So what did we actually do in 2020? We handled almost 5,400 calls for service. That's directed patrols, agency assist, alarms, suspicious person or circumstances. Those are the top calls. That's down 6.6%. And to me, that's actually surprising for the amount of services that were put on hold, town-wide in terms of businesses and whatnot. To be down 6.6% says that there's still a lot going on in this town. We arrested 269 people for over 401 offenses, mostly DUI, retail theft, and driving with a suspended license, to name a few. Those were at the top. That's down 45% in terms of the number of people, and 61% in terms of the number of offenses. That's a huge drop. But keep in mind that everything was down 61%, but domestic assault and retail theft were only down 23%. So what does this say about what's going on in our society as a whole? We made 1,937 motor vehicle stops. And I'd like to hammer this home. The most serious action taken in 81.7% of the time was a written warning. So over 4 out of 5 drivers left with just a written warning as a result of the interaction. We did issue 376 civil violation complaints or tickets, with the most common being speeding, and that I hope that comes as no surprise to anyone who's lived in Williston for a period of time. We issued almost 2,000 written warnings. Again, most common speeding, shouldn't be a surprise. Traffic stops were down 55%, and again, the pandemic was a huge reason for that. But the people receiving only a warning increased 7.3%. We like to break things down, get some demographic data by race. So who are we stopping? 90.19% of the drivers that we stopped, we selected white as the race, and then it goes down in percentage from there. I am proud to say that unknown or blank is 0.0%. I worked really hard, and we all worked really hard. I spent a significant amount of time going through and taking the data that we had and fixing the errors, issues. You know, when you go from one ticketing system to our records management and then batch that out, when you enter data, there's a lot of issues. I spent a lot of time cleaning that up, and I'm proud to say that out of like 32,000 entries, we only had 7 blanks, and they were like a make. It wasn't anything of what I would consider significant. So that's awesome to all of us. Let's look a little deeper into that. Greater than a 55% reduction in stops. And you've got basically you have the percentages from this year and then 2019. Everything was fairly on par and fairly close in terms of the percentages. My big thing is, how are persons who identify as multiple races being classified? Under law and Vermont Criminal Justice Training Council standards, the officer conducting the stop must use their own discretion to select a single race, and we cannot ask the person, we must select that. So how are we capturing that data? We simply can't. There's limitations to this, and we're bound by law and by rule and by training to do it a certain way. We only searched 3 vehicles in 2020. Again, that should come as no surprise in that we were trying to maintain social distancing. It was 1 in 222 stops. There was a search conducted, and it was 1 in 645. 2 searches were of white operators, and both of these searches yielded contraband or evidence of a crime. And 1 search was of a black operator. That search yielded contraband or evidence of a crime as well. So is race an issue here? If I draw a pie graph, you'll see 33 and 66%. If you look at the numbers, it's not. Statistically, it's not an issue. There's one, your sample set is so small, you just can't draw any conclusions from 3.
So were there any searches where no contraband or illicit things or evidence was found?
There was not.
I'm assuming these searches were they consent?
I do not know if it was consent or a search warrant.
Yeah.
I didn't break it down on that. I do have the raw data that's available for that.
Just curious.
Here's the next question. One of the latest thought processes is that we should be relying on the race of operators for motor vehicle crashes to figure out who's the driving public. That's the driving public where we are externally called on to interact with these people, removing many or most of the possibilities of implicit or explicit bias. Again, it has its shortfalls because it still requires our perception to classify people. And the data is readily available, which is awesome. So if you look at this, this is the chart comparing the web crash data. The biggest problem with the web crash data to me is that 4.85% unknown or blank. But if you remove that, our percentages are fairly spot on with what I would expect if you were to just randomly select it. If you see black is just about fairly spot on. Asian is actually, we're small, quite a bit smaller. Hispanic, we're a little bit larger, but statistically, again, that's an insignificant number. Native American, we had 0.0%, but again, statistically, a very small number. So as we compile our data annually, I always look at anomalies. You can look at this data 10 ways to Sunday, but you know, where are the issues? I noticed in 2020, our outcomes by race, we see black drivers being arrested at a rate of 8.2% as a result of traffic stops versus 2.9 for white or 3.7 for Asian, 0 for Hispanic. So let's look at why. So do we have a problem? Let's take a look at that. So what was the root cause of these motor vehicle stops? There were 9 of them. 9 represented 8.2%. 3 of them came out of citizen complaints for erratic operation, and they all resulted in DUI, 2 for drugs and 1 for alcohol with a BAC of greater than 0.2. It's about 2.5 times the legal limit. 1 was a crash, car versus pole. They were doing 100 and a 40, and they were arrested for negligent operation. 97 and a 65, 92 and a 65, 75 and a 55, 73 and a 55, and then 1 for defective equipment. So when you drill down into that data, do we have a problem based on that? Not on the police side, I don't think. I don't see anything about any of those that really stands out as, we are doing something incorrect.
Do you have, are there criteria that the department has for when you'd make an arrest for a neg op from speeding?
As a general rule, we try to, at 30 miles, more than 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, that's typically the threshold that we use.
Which is the excessive speed, close to the excessive speed.
It is, in fact, it is excessive speed. That's what we rely on to judge negligent operation, is we rely on that excessive speed statute.
Do you know, were there any non-African Americans that were arrested for negligent operation due solely to speeding?
Yes, there were. Do I have the number in front of me? No, I do not, but absolutely there are a large number of persons that are always arrested by Williston Police every year for 31 or more over the speed limit. Unfortunately, it's just the volume of traffic that we have. So, and I'm happy to get those numbers if anyone needs that. There was a 40-something people that were arrested that I'd have to parse through that were traffic related that would be relevant to us. Okay. One of the things we do to combat bias, racism, and poor data training is training. As I read the slide at the same time, all of us have multiple trainings related to these topics, all of us. We host in-house trainings. We are constantly refining our data collection practices, but we are bound by state law, and we do have bias-free policing training that is required by the Criminal Justice Training Council. We always welcome community involvement. We've got the Neighborhood Watch program that we do regularly. Chief Foley has also hosted Coffee with a Cop, unfortunately on pause because of COVID, but I'm assuming we're going to get back into that when permitted. And the speed carts are massive. Our number 1 complaint from Williston residents is about speed and traffic in general. We publish that data on our website. I think transparency is key, and I love to post that because the residents can say, does my neighborhood have a problem? You tell me what you think on that. In addition to regularly documented neighborhood patrols by all of the uniformed patrol officers, we maintain a rigorous speed monitoring program as part of our level 1 response in concert with the traffic calming policy for the town. We've got 2 speed carts, and we have 1, I call it a covert monitor, that we can put out. That way we can see what people are up to without influencing their behavior. Doesn't track people individually, it simply tracks the date, the time, the miles per hour, that's it, and the direction of travel. So we can take a look at it and see, do we have a problem? I put the carts out, and we've got 2 of them that I put out just after the snow stops in April-ish. And I leave it out as late as I possibly can until the solar charges for it. Either there's not enough light for it or the snow hits. I don't want them getting in the way of public works. I just can't have that happening. In 2020, there were over 320 days of activity, and that's between the 2 carts together. We counted almost 500,000 vehicles. And that's huge because we put these devices a lot of times in the neighborhoods. So that's 500,000 cars being counted in neighborhoods a lot of the time. A lot of these neighborhood complaints are satisfied through the use of the carts plus us sitting out there. We do have a number of pass-through roads that require constant maintenance, but we find that the neighborhoods are generally, the people that live there are generally the root cause of it, and our presence sort of quells that generally. I included a table, and I won't necessarily go through it, but this is our covert speed study where I can sit here and I've got quite a bit of metrics that I can look at. I like to look at the percentage of people going more than 10 miles an hour over the speed limit and the people that are going more than 20% or 20 miles an hour over the speed limit. Those are big, to me, those are the big numbers, and it shouldn't come as no surprise to you that the hot spots for us are 3188 South Brownell down by the horse farm, 632 River Cove Road that's by the pump station, and Governor Chittenden Road. It had a higher percentage, but a low actual volume of that. So that may come as a surprise to some. And our speed carts that are actually marked that we have out there, the radar speed feedback signs, those pretty much show the same thing. You know, River Cove Road is sort of at the top of it. Old Creamery is always a problem, and Oak Hill Road. Again, if you've been in Williston for a long period of time, those roads should come as no surprise to anyone. And that data, again, is available on our website, and I'm happy to have a discussion with anyone that has any questions, concerns, or wants the card out. By all means, reach out, and I will add it to our long list of places where people would like them. Our Comfort Dog program, obviously you guys have been apprised of all that. That's deeply rooted in community interaction and relations. So that's another way we are interacting with the community. One of the mission statements of the program is to foster dialogue and communications between the police department and the community we serve. So much like the speed cart program, that's another community involvement, community engagement where there's feedback and discussion. Let's talk about the arrests. 269 arrests over 401 offenses. Switch gears a little bit into this. 225 of those arrests where the person was listed as having a race of white or Caucasian. 19 were Black or African American, 3 were Asian, 5 were Hispanic, and 0 were Native American. We've got 17 that are unknown due to expunged or sealed records. That's a problem for us. I don't like the unknown. Keep that in mind. The expungements are a great thing, but unfortunately with expungements comes a loss of data that we just simply can't get back. Is this representative of the population in Williston? I don't know, and I can't answer that question. Unlike Web Crash, where we've got data of the driving population, I don't know how people are getting to Williston. The bus, they're walking, however, you know, they're a passenger in a car. We can only tell so much because we're interacting with a lot of people that are not Williston residents. So let's talk about what we picked people up for. 65 were for DUI. That's a problem. That's a large percentage. 55 for retail theft. Again, that should come as no surprise. 43 for driving with a criminally suspended license, and it goes down from there. And these are just a fraction of the various charges. There's usually about 2 pages of various charges that we cite people for. There were 27 non-white arrests for 2020 for a total of 40 charges. Again, 10 for DUI, 5 for larceny or theft, 4 for driving with a license suspended. That's really close to that list I just read off. So again, pretty common theme here. What does this say? The numbers are similar in the percentages of white or Caucasian arrests and offenses. So do we have a problem? Do we have an issue? I don't see one out of that data at all. The only notable exception in there is that in 2020, there was a slightly higher percentage arrest rate of non-white persons for DUI or non-Caucasian. It's 37%. But again,
Can you explain that? What is the 37% of all DUI arrests were? What does that mean?
so we had 27 arrests in 2020 that were non-white or non-Caucasian.
Okay.
And 10 of those 27 arrests were for DUI.
Okay.
So we try to look at that and say, are we disproportionately arresting minorities or non-Caucasian people for certain offenses, or are we doing something that we can improve upon? And in this case, DUI is a non-negotiable offense in our book, so we have no latitude on that offense at all. Does that sort of clarify that as best I can?
Yeah.
You have data, similar data for white arrests in terms of
Yep.
The number of DUIs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and actually, if you subtract it, it means we arrested 55 persons who are identified as white or Caucasian for DUI. And percentage-wise, I'd have to do the math on that. I don't know the percentage in total. I can provide that certainly if that's what you're interested in.
Yeah.
So the state of Vermont has been pushing for criminal justice reform in various ways and shapes and forms. One of those reforms is the ability to steal and expunge records. Well, it's excellent. It also makes it impossible, like I said, for us to report on that data. It may require some legislative adjustments. This is a working process. Somebody needs to go back and say, what are we now missing out on? Even a few expungements are significant, because we're looking at numbers where, you look at searches, 3. Expunge one of those, and now we have 2, and it's 50% or 0% and 100%. This is significant for us. Obviously, this is just a quick snapshot of what we do. The metrics are all available on our website. We've posted all of the data up there. You're more than welcome. It's an Excel file. Anyone can take a look at it. I have the Excel sheet. Oh, apparently I can't. I'd have to end it. If anyone wants to see any particular metrics, by all means, I'm happy to provide whatever it is, but there are just so many ways to analyze this data. I just can't simply come up with everything that everyone would care to see, but I'm happy to do that for anyone that needs that. And you guys are also more than willing to download it, or more than welcome to download the data and do whatever you see fit with it.
And most of that.
It's already there. Yep, absolutely. I made sure that it was there and available prior to this meeting, so.
Good,
Thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive report. I appreciate the breakdown of the diversity, but when I come back to the bottom line, it's if you're following the law, you're not in the data.
Exactly. Yep,
Thanks.
that's what we look at. Any other questions I can entertain?
You mentioned that the data, the breakdowns in terms of race for like traffic stops and things were not statistically significant compared to the population out, like a breakdown of our county. It doesn't quite correlate with our population by race, by county. And so I just wanted to know kind of what would be considered statistically significant in terms of that variation.
Well, if you have to look at a couple things. You have to look at both percentages and raw numbers, because the minority population is we were talking like 1% in some of those categories. Having that go from 1% to 2%, you might say, wow, that's double. And then you look at it and realize it's 4 stops total. So we have to look at both of that. And if I saw it double, or I saw, a percentage of 50% jump, again, I'd look at the root causes of that and say, do we have a problem? Well, if it went from 4 to 6, I don't see a problem with that. If it went from 4 to 20, we might need to take a look at that data. Or if it went from, 100 to 200 or 100 to 150, then yeah, we may need to look at that. But when you go from, 1% to 1.4%, and I look at that and it's a difference of, 5 or 6 stops, I just don't see the statistical issue with that.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you.
report. Thank you. So we'll move on then to the police dispatch supervisor position and the description. And Eric, you're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I can introduce this. We have Chief and Lieutenant here as well for any questions, but the board called authorization of the 3rd full-time dispatch position last month, and we're in the process of hiring that candidate. That we have a good candidate, and I think that person's likely going to be starting in August sometime.
August 14th. August 14th.
Okay. What was I here? But as we're looking now, we have 3 staff in that police dispatch department, and I spoke with our leadership here about having one of those 3 play a supervisory role, and I believe a lot of that work's already occurring with at least one of the members of the department. So we don't have a formal position for that, so the request of the board is to create the formal position with the intent that it's a promotional opportunity within the department, and Chief and Lieutenant can speak more about some of those descriptions in the job description I shared in your packet of how that would settle within operations here. But I'll turn to the board if they have any further questions.
Any further questions for the chief or lieutenant on the job description?
not in the job description, but when we talked about the position last time, about creating it, you had mentioned that you were disclosing, obviously, the potential temporary kind of nature of the dispatch, because we weren't sure what the long-term plans for dispatch were. So thinking about, this supervisory position in terms of the long-term plans, how have you kind of factored that in?
Well, our crew over there right now, they're kind of in a, it's uncharted waters right now because they have secure jobs right now. And the crew that we now have are very, very good dispatchers. And I would say that they're some of the best in the entire county. But at the same time, for me, I oversee the patrol division as well as the dispatch positions. I'm fortunate to have 4 sergeants on the road for the patrol side. I really need somebody in the position of that buffer for me when it comes to dispatch. But they're fully aware of what's going on. The whole regional discussion is just, it's so in limbo, and it's been like that for decades. So, our approach is we need to move forward, and we're not going to wait for another entity to try to figure out what they're going to do. For what we need right now, this is what we need right now.
And they understand that, and if you're a supervisor now, if the regional does open up, it gives them a benefit of going into that if they do decide to go there as a supervisor. It's not just the answering phone, it's dealing with the public and all that. And, we feel confident in having somebody there. And it gives us another buffer to the offices and all that. So I think it'll work.
Other questions? If not, then there's a motion suggested.
Move to create the position of police dispatch supervisor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes, so thank you very much for all your work.
And I'm not sure if everybody heard it, we have made an offer to the newest dispatcher. He's begins on the 14th of August. He's got some in-house training to do with us, but he's a certified dispatcher from another agency. So we believe it's a benefit for the community to bring him on and all that. He looked forward to joining us. So.
And we did get a couple certified dispatchers.
Right. That put in for it. So again, but it wasn't like, knocking down the door, like we talked at the beginning about law enforcement and policing, that, that's a dilemma we're facing, knock on wood, that we are at full strength now, both in the patrol side and dispatching, but, we got to keep our eyes and ears open that, it's going to be a struggle for every agency here in Vermont to try to find certified and responsible and recruits to join law enforcement.
Yeah, and a testament to the department and the town. We're fully staffed now in the patrol side of things, and now with dispatch, and every agency is looking for dispatchers and police officers, and we're continuing to get very, very good qualified candidates.
Full staffed. I don't recall the department has ever been there.
We have never been.
And I've been on the board for a long time. Well, the staffing of police departments, as I recall, that became an issue, I think, back with the Iraq War, that a lot of the people who would otherwise be police officers were in the military and then choosing other professions thereafter, and there seemed to be like an inflection point. But what do I know?
And the other thing is, I would, if you're interested in spending a couple of hours out with the troops out in the field, we encourage you to do some ride-alongs with us, so you have a better perspective that without us coming here and presenting, but you see firsthand how we operate out there. So the door's always open.
Great.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
So let's move on to the Community Justice Center bylaw amendment. Eric's going to lead off with that, but Crystal Lee McSweeney and Bob Stafford, who is the board chair, will join us as well. Welcome.
Yeah, just just to recap for the board, you might recall earlier this year, we brought this subject forward, and there was consensus for the board to explore an amendment to the bylaws of the governance structure of the Community Justice Center Board. So Crystal Lee and Bob are here this evening to walk through this. They've done a lot of work. It's quite the governance structure to wrangle with, I'll say, with a lot of moving pieces. So we had a couple conversations along the way, and I think we've got a good draft tonight for the board to look at and provide any feedback to staff as we move ahead here. So I'll turn it over to Crystal Lee and Bob.
Thanks, Eric. So hello, everyone. First off, I want to say thank you for taking the time to look through the documents that we prepared. As Eric said, we did spend a significant amount of time both drafting and redrafting quite a few times, but also really thinking about the rationale for making this change. And as all of you, I believe, are aware, the current structure that we have really mandates that all of our volunteers are considered to be board members. And with the growth of our center and the interest of volunteering in the other towns that have now really, I would say, kind of bought into restorative work, it has created, I think, a really difficult model for us to imagine that currently we have about 40 volunteers, which doesn't seem like a sustainable model for us to get work done in an efficient and effective way. So we created a work team through our current membership, and we sat down and went through our bylaws and really looked at what we felt was working, what we felt we needed to make some changes, and include some greater work around thinking about all of the towns that we serve. And wanting to make sure that we have good representation from all of those towns, and then including the opportunity for a youth lead, as our youth panels have grown quite substantially as well. And in addition to that, one of the things that I think is really important is to recognize that as we really value all of you and your support of the CJC and interviewing all of the people who are interested in working with us, and we know how much of a time issue that can be, and recognizing that through COVID, things have changed, but we have people who have signed on to be volunteers, who have gone through their training and went through the background checks, who have been waiting 10, 11 months to volunteer and have not had the opportunity to yet. And that also includes some youth who went through the full training and never got to sit on a panel. So that's a little discouraging to us, just to know that we have such passionate people who want to be doing this work, and the structure is just making it a little bit difficult. And then the other piece that I think is really significant about why we really want to think about making these changes is the amount of cases that we have. You've continually heard from us that our case numbers are continuing to grow, and some of our volunteers are getting tired, and we have to rely on the same group of volunteers because our pool isn't as big as we would like it or need it to be. So looking at making some of these changes would allow, I think, for greater work on a board level, expanding our membership, and I think just bringing more representation from the towns that we serve. Bob, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you. This was a great process, I think, for us to go through, because I think it was time for some change, especially with the growth that Crystal Lee has responded to. And to be able to assemble the team of workers that we did with the consent of the regular board. I mean, the regular board consented on this because we asked for volunteers, for them to spend the time and to think about how to make this organization more efficient. I think we've done that in these bylaws. I could go through some of the highlights, but I think you've read it, and we're certainly open to questions. So thank you for having us here this evening. We're kind of excited about this change, and we're not trying to take away your authority or anything, but we're trying to relieve the board of some responsibility by us, in fact, not only recruiting the general membership, but also approving them. But then again, the board would be not necessarily recruiting the executive board, but would be approving the executive board members as well. And we think that's very important, that you still have a role in what we're doing. as far as the leadership team?
It looks to me like you streamlined it very nicely. I like the new wordings on mission statement and other things that are in here. I just had a couple of things on the on page 2 of the new document. Number 2 is misspelled.
Sorry, we will fix that.
So that'll be corrected at some point in time. The other question I had is on page 4 at the very bottom, E2F. The member has not satisfactorily complied with the remediation plan, a recommendation to the select board to terminate membership. So it's actually us that would terminate that, but do we have, and I don't remember if we have a procedure in writing about how to do this. Do we have a hearing with the person and then make a recommendation? Is there any appeal from our decision?
That's a really great question. From my knowledge, what we have in place, and I believe all CJCs have in place, is the opportunity for any member to go through a restorative process to make amends for any infraction or harm that might have been caused. And if that's not done to the satisfaction of a panel that would hear that, then we would make that recommendation to the select board for termination. I believe that we actually have not had to terminate anyone in all of the years that I've been a part of the CJC, even when I started out as a volunteer. And generally, I think when we have had very minor issues, it's been very easy to correct them and use the restorative plan. And that's what I would hope that we would be doing. Otherwise, we wouldn't be living up to our mission and vision of restorative work.
There is a provision in the town's conflict of interest and ethics ordinance that outlines a process for removal of a town volunteer. I think it involves a subcommittee of the BCA to begin and then a recommendation. So that becomes kind of the final step if there's not able to make a restorative process to start out with.
Thanks. Remember that now. Yeah. Other questions, comments?
I had a question on page 4. D, terms of membership. 2, all other members will serve at the pleasure of the towns as deemed appropriate, or of the town as deemed appropriate. The town in that context meaning what?
So again, thinking in terms of how the towns in which we serve, which are highlighted through our grant. So wanting to make sure that we have people from those towns, but at this point, the select board really, the Williston Selectboard is really the governing body.
Okay, so pleasure of the town, which town?
So the other members would be not the executive team, it would be the other members, the other volunteers. So we're hoping to have a 9-member executive team and then allow for up to 50 volunteers that are comprised from all of the towns that we serve.
Okay, so like the pleasure of the town of Richmond?
It would be.
If that person came from Richmond?
Right.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's okay. I just, as a, lawyer, when I read that, I thought, like the whole town, like all the voters, the school, but that makes sense in context, so I won't be as anal retentive as my instincts.
Do you have any recommendations for how to clear that up for you?
Sponsoring town, originating town. I don't think it's a. I don't think the pillars of the republic are going to be shaken by that. I'm just not sure. I can't imagine somebody on the board as a member under D2 is going to say, wait a minute, I serve at the pleasure of the town, and there was no town vote to get me off this board. Only the select board of Richmond kicked me off. I don't see that happening, so I don't think it's a big issue.
How about if we describe it as service area towns? Because on the first page, we speak to service area, and then we define the town.
Sure.
We describe them.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Other questions, comments?
I just want to commend you for, working really hard on designating the core values of the CJC. I think that's imperative, and very thoughtful in the way that you've gone about doing that, and important, obviously, to the work that you're doing. In terms of membership, so you're hoping to boost it up to 50. I assume you can probably meet that now with volunteer requests. What are you doing in terms of recruitment for like other towns? You said you want representation. I know historically that's been kind of an issue, getting members from other serving communities. Is that no longer?
Yeah, so we took on a really big effort. Bob was really instrumental in helping to make this happen, but we went into all of the service area police departments to train all of the officers in restorative justice and have held community education forums to educate community members about the CJC, kind of the breadth of the work that we do and how people can become volunteers. And I feel terrible because Eric's email tends to get bombarded with people who are interested in volunteering. And I think I've shared that we have a very, very long wait list and have worked with the high schools as well to reach out and let folks know that there is opportunity for high schoolers to join the youth panel. And also to reach out to the private schools in which many of our residents would be attending and have had great success in all of those areas.
And I've spoken with Crystal Lee, it is a change, and it's the board doesn't get to meet a new member necessarily when they're interviewing and being appointed just for the sheer volume here, but could arrange an annual kind of, a mixer or a picnic or some way for the board to still meet some of these new volunteers and have a presentation. So it's certainly something we could look at.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for mentioning that. I was going to also offer, similarly to what Chief Foley had presented, we would love for each and every one of you to come. Greta, I know you've got experience as a former volunteer, but I would really love for all of you to come and really see what the CJC does, see how a panel or a circle operates, and then really get to know some of the people who are doing this excellent work in our town. I think it really is impactful, and I think you would get a lot out of it if you came. And I think our volunteers would really appreciate getting to know you as well, differently than just tell me why you're interested in volunteering.
So your executive board then that will be nominated from within your existing membership, and then you envision that then they would come, the executive board nominees would then come before us for final approval as the executive board.
Yes. And we've already identified those people.
Great.
As
Okay.
well.
Cool.
Yeah, from a process standpoint, I thought should the board move forward with these bylaw amendments, then at next meeting, potentially we could bring forward a slate of individuals who've been appointed in the past, and at the board's discretion may or may not need to interview all 9 people, but could have the slate as recommended by the director and the chair here.
And who knows, I may get voted out.
I might move up.
You mean voting me out?
Other comments or questions? There is a motion suggested that probably needs to be a little bit modified because we're recommending a small change.
I'd move to approve the amendments to the Community Justice Center bylaws as presented and amended.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes, so thank you very much for all your hard work on this. And
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for listening to us and your input. Clarify, that's important. Yeah. Aye.
good, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Good work. Thank you.
Moving on to the coronavirus local fiscal recovery funding. Eric?
So the board likely recalls our local coronavirus relief funding through ARPA that was passed earlier this year. So we're in a process of formally accepting that funding. My understanding was as manager, I could accept that funding like any other federal or state funding that's out there. But in further conversation with VLCT and the Regional Planning Commission, they've recommended, since it is this federal money with a lot of specifics tied to it that the board, for the record, memorialized that we have formally accepted this funding and designate, recommended myself as a contact and Shirley to handle the administrative side of it. I don't have a further update on the final dollar amount. The county money aid is still at best in flux. We don't have any further guidance from at the state level or federal level with our delegations at this point. I can say our allocation that we are aware of, that we are accepting right now, is just over $1 million. I believe $500,000 is going to be deposited in our account if it hasn't already. The deadline to formally accept it is July 15th, and what I would do tomorrow is submit the last form that I have to formally accepting it, and we're well within the time frame here. So these are really more formalities, unless the board would not like to accept this funding. I would recommend it, but the conversation we can have. But, you'll see a series of motions in the report.
Any questions for Eric? We do have 3 motions that should be made tonight.
Who wants to take a breath?
Do you want to approve them individually, or can I?
Maybe for the record.
Yeah,
individually,
okay, all right.
No, nothing with federal funding to chance here.
I move that the town of Williston accept its allocation of coronavirus local fiscal recovery funding from the U.S. Treasury, along with the award terms and conditions and assurances of compliance with civil rights requirements that are requirements of accepting these funds.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
I have 4. So we've approved that motion. Next,
I move that we appoint Town Manager Eric Wells to serve as the town's authorized representative as required by the coronavirus local fiscal recovery funding from the U.S. Treasury to sign the award terms and conditions and assurances of compliance with the civil rights requirements.
is there a second?
Second.
Is there a discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. So we have 4 ayes on that one as well.
I move that we name Finance Director Shirley Goodell Lackey to be the contact person for the town's coronavirus local fiscal recovery funding award from the U.S. Treasury.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on the motion. If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 We have 4 ayes on that as well. So thank you very much. We'll move on to the Muddy Brook Culvert bond financing documents, and Shirley is going to talk about that tonight.
I thought I'd just take you through the purpose of the main documents before, some of you I already know signed the documents, but so there's the resolution and certification, which has attached to it the document from Sarah that talks about, that Sarah signed, I should say, as the clerk, that talks about that we posted it, what the vote was. So that is the certification part of this document, saying that the voters have provided authorization for us to move forward with the bond. And the resolution that is contained within the same document is just outlining the high-level needs or requirements that we have to meet in order to move forward with the bond documents themselves. The loan agreement, as I'm sure most of you know, lays out the terms of the bond in terms of interest rates, repayments, maturity. It also has a bit about the trustee and how we make that repayment on the bond. In this transaction, I'm still getting familiar with the bond bank. So what actually happens is this loan agreement is our agreement, and the bond agreement are agreements with the bond bank, who takes those and then sells that, and they pool a bunch of towns together. So whoever is applying for an application, because they have 2 fundings a year, And then the bond bank sells those bonds on the open market. So they have pulled a bunch of communities together to make a big package financing, and that's split up amongst the town, whoever's applying for funding. So the last major document you have are the actual tax certification. The bonds from the bond bank are tax exempt, and there are certain things that the town needs to do, or that we are committing that we do, and annually we have to certify that we are following the rules in order to keep this debt tax exempt. And so that's what the tax exempt certificate does. It lays out what those conditions are that we have to follow. And that is really all I was going to say, unless you have questions.
Questions for Shirley? I need a motion then.
I'll move the resolution and certificate concerning the financing for the Moneybrook Culvert project and the attachments thereto be approved.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
We have 4 ayes on that one as well, so thank you very much, Shirley.
Thank you, Shirley.
And manager's report.
Yep, I don't have a whole lot this evening. Just out on the Moneybrook Culvert project that board may recall where the bid came in, we are a little bit short on that, and staff, we did get the other structures grant from V-Trans, but staff will be coming back later this summer with some options to consider for the final financing piece. Shirley Bruce and I will bring that back to the board here the next month or so. I shared in my written report and in your packet a hard copy of the draft vision plan for Taft Corners. I think Ted and Greta, I left you a hard copy tonight in case you want the hard copy. Just to preview, that's going to be on your agenda for July 27th. And the Planning Commission will be meeting jointly for that portion of the meeting to discuss the vision plan. So certainly, it's a large document. Give you a little extra time with it. If you have any questions or want to chat any further with myself or Matt beforehand, just let me know with that coming up here. I think been a busy meeting. I'll be brief tonight. That's all I'll pass on. So.
Under other business, we do have a catering permit to take up.
Yep, I got a catering permit this afternoon. Good timing for the meeting tonight. Caterers 802 Cocktails. It's for a wedding reception at the Oak Hill, at the Ashland Family Barn on July 24th. Staff has no objections to this permit. It's a location that we have approved for an event like this. So I recommend the board to approve this permit if you'd like to.
Any questions for Eric? I'm looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have 4 on that one as well. Any other business we need to talk about tonight? If not, we are adjourned. 9:10.
Right on time there.